On November 10th, 1931, the 4th Academy Awards took place to give out some awards and named Cimarron as the outstanding picture of that year. That's pretty much the beginning and end of the trivia for the ceremony, so I should probably stop discussing them going forward. Either way, let's dive right into the movie. Cimarron is interesting in that this is the first Oscar win that wasn't really revolutionary. You could argue the first 3 winners all being big groundbreakers, but that's not the case here. In addition, it's also the first and one of the very few Oscar winners that was actually a box office failure, as it failed to recoup its budget during the initial theatrical release. Cimarron revolves around a young couple called the Kravitz, Yancey, played by Richard Dix, and Sabra, played by Irene Dunne. After the new territory of Oklahoma opens up for settlers, the two decide to join in the land rush and move to a settler town called Osage. There, Yancey decides to set up a newspaper and becomes a leader of the community, as the two strive to turn Osage into a respectable town. It isn't long, however, before Yancey's honest morals and no-nonsense attitude puts him on the wrong side of the local bandit Lon Yondes, played by Stanley Fields. Yondes basically controls Osage and wants to run the town however he likes. Yancey is the only one who can stand up to him, and the two begin threatening each other and... Hang on, wait a minute. Isn't this the plot to Roadhouse? It's not too often that you hear of Academy Award winners that share stories with Patrick Swayze action films. Either way, for all the build-up it's given, the plot is actually resolved relatively early in the film. Very quickly, I might add. In fact, I'd say disappointingly so. The rest of Cimarron then basically tells of Yancey and Sabra's lives as Osage grows and grows, spanning a 40-year time period, detailing Oklahoma's transformation into a state, and how the world changes in that time. I don't know where to even begin with this movie. This is one of those films that, when I was watching it, it was just kind of okay, but after it was over and I thought back, it very quickly fell apart. The more I think back on it and analyze it, the more I realize just how much I really hate this movie. I already mentioned that what seems like a pretty cool plot is actually resolved in a very lazy and lackluster manner, but that's just scratching the surface. Probably the easiest way to talk about Cimarron would be to go through the problems in order. The film opens up with the Oklahoma land rush of 1889, where thousands of settlers lined up to dash into the new territory to get their own piece of land. The scene was considered a fine spectacle back in the day, and the movie's most memorable moment. It is indeed very impressive to watch, but there's one big problem with it. See if you can spot it. Where's the damn music? There should be a soaring orchestra that helps capture the sense of awe and amazement upon seeing all this, but you don't get it. And don't tell me that the audio capability wasn't there. Later in the film, there's a scene in a church where you hear the whole congregation sing a hymn together, and they amplify whoever's voice we're focusing on. That's a pretty complex thing to do. And you mean to tell me that you couldn't put music over this scene? Oh, if they just waited 10 years, they could have commissioned Rodgers and Hammerstein to do it for them. After the whole Yondes plotline is resolved, we then get into the heart of the movie, where Yancey will frequently leave his wife and kids at the drop of a hat for years at a time. They say he does this because he's a free spirit, which is another way of saying that he's the kind of deadbeat who considers raising a family as a side project. It's not like he's going off to go fight in the Spanish-American War, find the cure for polio, or, something important. He just heard that there's some new settlements popping up and he wants to go find out, and if they don't want to come with him, too bad, so sad. Eventually he does come back, and his wife is understandably pissed off and he chews her out for it. Now, I'm going to repeat that, because it bears repeating. This guy bails on his family for 5 years, and when he gets back, his wife is at fault for getting mad at him. I wouldn't mind so much, except the film clearly wants you to take his side. Yeah, it ends up trying to portray him as being right, like, he's the free spirit who can't be contained, and ignoring your obligations while expecting her to uphold her own is somehow perfectly okay. The film also tries to portray Yancey as a very forward-thinking individual, as he advocates and stands up for minorities that most other members of society would reject, such as Native Americans and prostitutes. This is probably why Cimarron won the Oscar, as the movie tries to push the envelope and sell itself as being very progressive. The major conflict is Yancey and Sabra arguing about how to treat these people. The problem with this, however, is that you don't really get to know any of the prostitutes or Native Americans that Yancey sticks up for. Sure, you see them, you know their names, but you don't know them. I couldn't tell you what their personalities are, what their motivations are, any memorable lines, or really anything. They're just things that you take care of. This is a sort of slacktivism that many films that get nominated or win the Oscars usually espouse, and is very popular in Hollywood. They make a story about the white guy who saves these minorities without having to focus on the minorities, and as a result they all get to pat themselves on the back for feeling like they did something. While a lot of other films that fall victim to this at the very least try to keep it fair or hide it a bit, Cimarron is just so transparently slacktivist, it's insufferable. Especially since his idealized main character is, like I said, a hypocrite. Seriously, this guy is one of the biggest pieces of shit I have ever seen in a movie. I especially love how they talk about him as being this forward-thinking, progressive person who fights for the little man, but he also talks down to and condescends the token black character. Oh, I haven't even started there yet. Yeah, the Cabarets have a black servant that tags along with them for the journey named Isaiah, played by Eugene Jackson. The good news is that he is actually played by a black man. The bad news is that he's a really racist depiction of a black man. He's an incompetent moron that sucks at everything he does and acts like the bastard child of Short Round and Bubbles from The Wire. All of his mannerisms do nothing but grate your nerves. Then you remember that he's an incredibly racist caricature, and you only get angrier. I would call him the most annoying character in the movie, but, well, we have this guy for that.
I'd like to talk to you a minute if you have time. You see, I'm a printer and a darn good one. And you see, I heard you were going to open a newspaper office called the Oklahoma Vehicle Office.
Yeah, between these two, I feel like strangling Cimarron half the time. Probably the biggest issue of the film is the thing that was supposed to be its biggest selling point, that being how the movie treats the passing of time. Years will fly by between scenes, and which can work if we're just going over the important stuff, but we're not just going over the important stuff. Whenever we get to a big moment, it doesn't feel like a jaw-dropping scene. You're just scratching your head confused, feeling like you missed something that you didn't get to see. For example, there's a scene where a bandit, played by William Collier Jr., attacks the town and Yancey fights him. But Yancey and this bandit know each other previously and are on pretty good terms. So why is he attacking the town? Why are they fighting? Did they fall out? What caused them to fall out? Does the bandit not care? Why does he not care? These are all important questions, but the movie doesn't have time to answer them because apparently watching these two Nimrods is somehow more important. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the last 20 or so minutes of the film. Now, to Cimarron's credit, the ending part is actually pretty solid. It takes place many years later as Sabra is now an old woman, reflecting on her life and how much things have changed at the beginning of the film. You see all the side characters that you've gotten to know over the course of the movie, and she's invited to a celebratory dinner where she talks about how much she's learned. She gives a final speech that's actually a pretty good speech, and manages to convey the heart and lesson of the film without being too preachy. It's a nice collection of scenes and gives the impression that you've come to the end of a long journey with these characters. But that's the problem though. You haven't been on a long journey with these characters. You've seen pieces of the journey, but you haven't actually undergone a change. Literally, the scene right before this is what was supposed to be the catalyst for Sabra's change, and then, all of a sudden, it jumps forward to her as an old woman. If this is supposed to be the heart of the film, about how Sabra learned from Yancey how to be more accepting, then that's where the movie should have began. They literally cut out her entire character arc. It's not like they couldn't have portrayed it either, because the woman who plays her seems like she's a good actress. Cimarron is the prime example of a film that has aged really poorly. When it first came out, it was the critical darling of the year, and it was pretty fast-tracked to the Oscar for Outstanding Picture. Nowadays, though, contemporary reviews tend to look at it as less favorably. Even ignoring the casual racism and hypocritical main character, the movie really feels like it accomplished absolutely nothing after it was all said and done. And it's almost 2.5 hours. That's a lot of time to invest for something that accomplishes nothing. In case you're thinking that this was one of the first films to have an epic scope that spanned several decades, it really wasn't. The Birth of a Nation accomplished the same thing 15 years before this came out, so seeing movies that spanned this large of a time frame was nothing new. So, with that in mind, did it actually deserve the Oscar, even keeping in mind the different views at the time? Well, that's what the next video is for, isn't it? Join me there, and we'll get to the bottom of this.
Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way. All the cattle are standing like statues. All the cattle are standing like statues. They don't turn their heads as they see me ride by. But a little brown maverick is winking
have to do is follow 3 simple rules. 1, never underestimate your opponent. Expect the unexpected. 2, take it outside. Never start anything inside the bar unless it's absolutely necessary. And 3, be nice.
I wonder if somebody calls my mama a whore.
Is she?